My name is Steve at Airguns of Arizona. I'm one of the repair techs here, and today we're going to be going through the FX INDY. We're going to be repairing the pump system on the INDY. This rifle here is very unique. It has a system that you can actually pump and fill the reservoir while in the field. At times, you are going to need to go through the pump to either replace seals, or if you live in a high humid area, you might want to take the pump out, clean, and make sure that the block system is clean. That way, moisture does not build up and have a tendency to do harm to this rifle. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to remove the pump system from this rifle. In some of our other videos, we've gone through removing the shroud system. And if you'd like, you can search that video and it will show you step to step on the removal and the installation of the shroud. We're going to pull, and we're going to lay this aside. We are then going to remove the barrel from this rifle. This is very easy to do. You have 3 set screws. You have the 2 main set screws that hold the barrel in place. These will be tight. You have a larger set screw in this rifle that is holding the brass piece that you can see. And what this set screw does, it secures the brass piece. You do not want to get this overly tight. If you tighten that too much, you can do damage to the brass piece. We're going to use a 2.5 millimeter wrench, and we will use the 4 millimeter Allen wrench when removing the barrel. The larger set screw, I will loosen. The barrel set screws will be tighter. You do not want to strip the Allen screws, but you want to make sure that they are tight whenever you install the barrel back in position. We will then pull on the barrel. In this case, the barrel came out without any issues. At times, we will need to go in and use a special drill bit that is made to cut down and smooth off the rough edges where the set screws made contact with the barrel. You can see marks on the barrel and on the brass piece. And at times, if you pull on the barrel and this barrel is not coming out for you, then what you would need to do, and I'll put the barrel back in and we'll show you. So the barrel is in place. Again, we're smoothing the surface with a drill bit that has been ground down and has a flat edge. We're not trying to drill into the barrel. We're trying to make it where those rough edges on the barrel are smooth. And so with this flattened, ground down drill bit, we're going through and we're making the rough edges, and we're taking the rough edge off the barrel. That way it can be removed. Very careful, you would go in and you would make contact with the barrel. You would turn it on, and what you're doing is you're smoothing the surface down. That way the barrel will slide out without any issues. I recommend using the drill bit, going down, making contact with the barrel in 3 locations if necessary. And then I recommend taking the rifle. If you have an air source, you can blow out the holes upside down. You want to get all the metalwork, the shavings, whatever you might have taken off with that drill bit, you don't want to leave in whenever you're pulling the barrel out. So with that in mind, again, if your barrel was stuck in place and you could not remove it, after drilling out those 3 spots and making light contact, you don't need to go heavy, you're just trying to smooth the surface, the barrel should just slide out as follows. At this point in our repair, it's time to take the stock off the rifle. In doing so, we're going to use a 3 millimeter Allen wrench. And in this case, this stock here has 2 Allen screws that we will be removing. I'm going to loosen that up, and then I will loosen this, make sure that everything loosens up as it should. This here Allen screw is loose. The front, the rear Allen screw, closest to the pistol grip, is loose. We will take out the Allen screw, lay it aside. The Allen screw in the front, it is loose, and we will remove this action from the stock. Once you're at this point, lay the stock in a safe area where you know it's not going to get damaged. We're at the point where we can remove the pump system from the block. In most cases, you can bring the arm out on this pump. I actually put my hand in this area. At this point, we're ready to remove the pump from the action, the block system. What you want to make sure is that the gun itself is empty on air. If there's any air, which you will notice right away by looking at the gauge, in your rifle, you'll need to discharge the air from the rifle. What I do is I take a small, standard size screwdriver. It needs to be small enough to actually go in, and what you're going to be doing is you're going to be pushing against the valve stem. It's going to open the valve stem up, discharging all the air. It's doing what the hammer is doing. So the hammer in the gun strikes the valve stem and releases the air, and that's how it discharges a pellet out of the rifle. I'm going to be blowing out the air by taking and giving the valve stem pressure, by putting pressure on the valve stem to discharge the air system as follows. That easy. Hold it there for a few seconds, making sure that all the air is discharged. You can look at the gauge and you'll know that the air is out of this rifle. Now we can safely remove the air cylinder away from the body. I find it pretty easy to remove the air cylinder. Once you have air out of the system, you can actually use this handle and you can basically unscrew. You can see how easy that was. Once air system is away and out of the system, it should break loose as follows. You will then take and you can either twist the action, the body itself, and I'd recommend at this point putting it close to something where if it happens to fall, it will fall at a shorter distance, causing less damage to the action if you happen to drop it. There you go. Lay the action, the body, aside. And now we have the pump in our hands. We're going to be using, for the set screw removals, and you'll have quite a few to take out before we can actually get into the actual pump system. The 4mm wrench will be used for most of these screws, the set screws. I will also take a 5mm wrench. The 5mm will go in one end, and it's very secure. The 4mm will go in the other, very secure. I recommend putting this body system in a place where you know that you're not going to drop it whenever you're releasing and taking these two Allen screws off the pump handle. Whenever you're removing these set screws from the pump arm, all you're doing is holding one set screw in place while turning the other. In this case, I'm holding the 5mm and I'm turning the 4mm wrench. I now have the part of the set screw out. I will lay that aside. I will take now the 4mm wrench, push in through, and where the 5mm wrench was, I will push that piece out of the arm itself. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to remove 4 set screws. We're going to remove the 2 set screws in the front, which would be the larger 4mm, and we're going to remove the 2 set screws on both sides of the pump that are the 3mm. It doesn't matter what order you go in. You can take the 3mm away first or the 4. It doesn't matter. We'll go ahead and unscrew the second 3mm set screw. Is now out. We can now take our 4mm wrench, loosen up the first set screw, lay it aside. Second set screw, lay it aside. At this point, I can go ahead and remove this actual arm by pulling. Whenever you have the arm out, away from the tube, you can lay it aside. Now we have a pump system that is pretty much ready to come apart. What we're going to do is remove the tube end away from the actual body. You can see here that there's cutouts where you can put a wrench. When removing this tube end, you might need to make a special tool. What you don't want to do is scar this if possible. In this case, I took a pair of pliers, I cut down the pair of pliers, and I smoothed the teeth and I took the teeth actually off these pliers. Before I put the pliers on the tube, I will want to put a piece of tape, something, whether it's sports tape, whether it's electrical tape, it doesn't matter, but you're going to try to keep this surface clean away from any marring. With a pair of pliers, which you will need to use, you can mar this if you're not careful. I'll cut the sports tape in half. I don't need to use the full width of that sports tape, and I will put the sports tape in the grooves that are cut out in the tube end. With a pair of pliers, take this in my hand and I will break that loose. I will unscrew this piece away from the body tube. I recommend having a clean towel in your hand. That way you can actually go through and you can actually clean these pieces as well as you're removing. In this case, a little bit of grease came out, a little bit of moisture. Some Q-tips, they're always nice and handy to have whenever you're doing any repair. Take a Q-tip and you'll want to go in and you'll want to clean the inside of the surface there. We're at the point where we can remove these 4 set screws. Removing these 4 set screws will allow us to pull the whole body system away from the tube itself. Again, this is a 4mm wrench that we'll be using. I will pull the first set screw out that is lined up with the actual cutout in the tube housing. There's a reason why I do this. I will remove the set screw. I will lay it aside. I will then take a sharp object and I will put a little scar mark on the inside where I took the set screw out. The reason I do this is I want to line that screw up with the cutout in the body tube. Makes your life a lot easier when you're putting it back together. That way you know that it's cammed right. After the set screw is out and I've marked it, I can now take the other 3 set screws away. We now have the 4 Allen screws away. We can now remove the pump itself. The easiest way to get this pump out is by actually pushing this pump out from this end. What you're going to do is you're going to take your thumb, take your hand, you're going to sit there, you're going to push the pump away and out, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this pump. What I recommend is using the 4mm wrench, the 5mm wrench. You can put actually in the hole on the pump arm. You can actually pull, and this right here will come out like follows. At this point, we have the pump itself away from the housing. Now we're at the point where we're going to remove the pump system itself. This is a system that is actually very easy to work on. And again, I recommend that the owners of an Indy or Independence at one point get to know their rifle. That way they can actually take this housing out, and if they need to replace seals, they can do so. Maybe pull the moisture out of the system because they live in a high humid area, that they can do that as well. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the black cap here, and that's where the valve, the inlet valve, is located. That's the one-way inlet valve, so whenever you're pumping, it's pushing air in, but it doesn't allow the air to come out. In this case, you can use pretty much any tool that you would like, a pair of pliers, a vise if you have a vise. I'm going to go ahead and use my small vise that I use on most of the items that whenever I don't need the vise with teeth. This is a nice clean vise, smooth, and it won't do any damage to the piece whenever I lock it in place. Remove it by finger. When I removed the end cap, you will notice that there is a spring and the valve itself, the inlet valve. If you notice there's a lot of grease or moisture on these components, you will need to make sure that you go through, wipe down, and at this point, it's a good idea to go ahead and replace the O-rings when necessary. After removing the valve, you can now remove portions of the pump. This is going to be actually fairly easy to do. In this case, I'm going to take the arm here and I'm going to turn it counterclockwise. What I'm doing is I'm removing the end piece, and this is actually sometimes this small piston itself, the arm itself inside, the piston rod, sometimes it comes out and this piece is attached to this. In this case, if it was attached, you will need to take, and there's a lock set screw that holds the actual small high pressure pump arm in place, making it where you cannot unscrew until you loosen up the lock set screw and remove it, put it aside. You can then take a flathead screwdriver, it'll lock into place, and you can actually hold this portion of the pump in place, and you can actually screw that piece out. Whenever you get it to a point where you know it's loose, you can actually hold on to the arm, and then you can go ahead and remove it the rest of the way. After removing the end piece, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the actual aluminum tube in a vise. Please try not to scar this. If you do scar it, you can take some real fine sandpaper and sand it smooth, but you want to take the rough edges away. Reason being is it's actually in movement. If you got the pump itself that is riding and there's O-rings inside these components, if you have a piece that's scarred up, it will damage the O-ring where you will not retain the pressure. So what we're going to do is we're going to use two rubber, you can use leather, you can use whatever you'd like, that's going to preserve this portion of the pump. At this point, we're going to be removing the tube end. We will go ahead and put this piece, the tube itself, in the vise. It is tight. Tighten it down. Okay. At this time, we're going to take off the tube end. We've got our tube end, we've got it actually locked into our vise, the actual aluminum tube. We're going to take some Allen screws. You can pick up Allen screws in your local hardware store that are the same size Allen screw that actually went into the housing itself whenever the main tube was in place. So you'll actually need to go down and pick these up. I use these screws for leverage. And so what I'm doing is I'm screwing one screw in, and I'm going to go ahead and screw the other screw in. What it's doing is making me a T-handle. And at this point, I can now set and I can unscrew this piece. Again, don't grab onto the threads because they are sharp and they will cut you. Once that's out, you can go ahead and look at the piece, inspect it. You can inspect the O-rings that are around it. Again, I would recommend that you replace the O-rings. It's always good to replace. You can buy the kit from us. We actually sell kits that will cover all the O-rings in this unit. At this time, we're going to take a look at it. I would, and this is a good example right here. This O-ring right here, whenever I pulled it out, whenever it was installed, I don't know when, but there is a slight tear from this O-ring right here. So you can see a slight mark on that O-ring. If I was to put that back in, it would not seal. And so you would be going through this process again for no reason. So go ahead, and if you look at the O-rings closely and you say that you can look at it, you can verify that there's no marks, no cuts on the O-ring, and they're fresh O-rings, then yeah, sure, go ahead and put them back in. I don't think you're going to have any issues. But in this case, we will need to put some new O-rings on the piece before we install. I also recommend, again, Q-tips for any job. You can go in, you can set, you can clean, grease, grime away from the unit, and it verifies that the unit itself is clean. I want to go over with you real quick. There's, again, I mentioned a seal kit that you can get for the unit itself. The seal kit will have the actual seals. They'll have the information as far as on where the seal actually goes. You'll have kind of it's a guide sheet that'll help you out. So you're not just guessing and we're going to send you a bunch of seals and you're going to be playing the match game. It actually shows this seal goes here, this seal goes here. There's seals that are inside that you'll need to replace. And so you'll need to follow that guideline if you're going to reseal your unit. A complete reseal is very important at times, and that will help you out whenever you are resealing your pump. At this time, we'll go ahead and we'll lay this piece aside. And we're going to remove the piece from the vise. Now we have the end without the tube in, without the end itself. There's a small O-ring. This is a buffering O-ring, so this O-ring will need to go back on, so don't forget it. I've done it before where I forget it and then I've got to put it back on. But that piece goes in there, and of course that piece is going to screw back on eventually. And what that does is whenever they hit and meet, they never actually connect and piece to piece. They never make that contact where it's metal to metal. That O-ring always takes up just enough room whenever the actual pump itself is in motion. Now we're down to the point where we can actually take and remove the inside, the high pressure portion of this pumping system. We'll go ahead and remove the brass tube, which you can see the brass. I call this brass, and it's brass, and then of course it's on the aluminum tube. And so we'll remove this portion. It's going to come out. Once you get this piece away, you can do the inspection. You can inspect the O-ring and you can inspect the support ring. The support ring, it's pre-cut from the factory, so you'll notice a split in it. Don't be alarmed. That's the only way to get that on this piece, by splitting it. So you'll take a look at that support ring, make sure that it's not damaged, and then lay it aside once you feel that you're comfortable with it. Okay, now we have the aluminum tube, the brass piece on the end. We're going to go ahead and remove the actual high pressure portion of this pump system. You can see that it comes out. Now we've got the piston itself in my hands, and we've got some grease. We have the actual O-ring. It's a high pressure O-ring. And what we'll want to do is we'll want to clean this off. We're going to go ahead and replace that O-ring. Go ahead and inspect the actual housing here. Again, you'll get a sheet whenever you get the repair kit, which will cover all the O-rings. And there's actually O-rings in places that you'll need to make sure that you look at. Inside, there's a small O-ring. This O-ring here, inside, actually is replaced by putting this portion back in the vise and unscrewing this brass piece. You can then go ahead and pull that O-ring, push it out, and then replace the O-ring with the new one. Then of course, screwing this back on, torquing it back into position with a little bit of wrench tight is what I recommend, and then going ahead and laying this aside, inspecting the aluminum tube, making sure that there's no rough edges on it. Once this is done, we'll go ahead and lay this aside. It's very important that you actually inspect the small pistons, the brass end, because at times, if you don't do the adjustments right whenever you're putting the pump back together, this portion of the piston, there's a steel rod and then there's a brass cap that goes over. This brass cap has like I said, a O-ring attached to it, but there's also an end. If it's hit hard, because it's not adjusted right, it can actually hit and break the end off, causing this O-ring and the whole mechanism to get out of whack, and then you will not gain any pressure on your pump at this point because it is destroyed on the inside. Then you'll have to actually take it apart, go through the whole process again. Okay, we are at the point where we need to remove the O-ring from the brass end. Again, you can see that there's a small cutout in this brass piece, and what we're going to be doing is sliding the tool, which is just a pick of some sort, in. I go ahead and I'll attach the pick to the O-ring. I'll go ahead and take that and pull that off. There you go. I have the O-ring in my hand and ready to replace with a new. The O-ring that is connected to the piston is a small O-ring that I recommend replacing every time you go through and reseal or check your system out. There's no reason that you wouldn't want to replace that O-ring. At this point, we're going to inspect again. We're going to visually make sure that everything is attached. It's solid. In this case, it is. I'll go ahead and clean the grease away from this unit. Clean the grease off. Everything looks good. I'll take a Q-tip just to make sure. Many of you have a compressor of some sort that you can actually set and you can blow your components off whenever you're cleaning. In this case, I carry a little cylinder with some air, and I'll go ahead and open this up, and I'll remove the remainder grime away with a little bit of air pressure. In the kits that you'll get, you'll receive the kit, and you'll have, like I said, the O-rings will come. A lot of times, I believe there's 2 O-rings that come with the kit. You only need 1. You'll put the other one aside. When putting this O-ring on, it's actually fairly easy to do. What you want to do is you want to use a very light portion of a silicone grease, and you'll actually put it on your finger, rub it on the O-ring, and then I'll actually attach the O-ring in one of the areas where it's cut out. You can actually see the cutout. I'll actually put the O-ring there. I'll then twist it around and lock it into place. I'll inspect the O-ring, making sure that I didn't do any damage to it. And then after we know that it's correct, it's on the piston itself, I'll actually put a small portion of grease on the piston itself. I'll put it on the O-ring. I don't want to go heavy, I'm just going with a light coat is what I'm doing. At this point, we can go ahead and put this part of the pump aside. Coming back to the tube itself, the aluminum tube, I will inspect the item here. I'll inspect the O-rings. Again, normally I would have O-rings here that I would replace. In this case, this O-ring here looks like it's in very good shape. I'm not going to replace this O-ring. There are some O-rings that you have to replace. There's some O-rings that you might not have to. This is actually a fairly new rifle, and so the O-rings that are on here are in good shape. I'll go ahead and clean. Again, I use Q-tips to clean, making sure that the items are clear, they're clean, they do not have any debris. I'm ready to go ahead and reinstall the piston itself back in. What you're going to do is slide this piston in. Remember, I put a light coat of grease on this, and you want a light coat of grease because your motion is up and down, and that's how you're building the pressure on the pump. You put too much grease in this system here, and what happens, it clogs it, and it'll make your life miserable. So what we're going to do is, with a light coat, we're going to go ahead and push that in place. It's going to come out the other side, back end. We're going to lock that into place. So now with a little bit of pressure, we put the tube and the shaft back into place. It's now in the position where I can actually pull, and I can actually push, just to make sure that it slides and it's gliding. A little bit of friction, but everything seems to be working fine. At this point, we'll lay this aside. We're going to take the black housing, the tube itself, we're going to inspect that. Again, we're going to inspect the O-ring. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and replace the O-rings on the unit. Very easy to replace. You can actually pinch the O-ring. It gives you a little bit of gap where you can actually stick in a tool in and remove the O-ring. Very simple to do. You can lay that aside. Take a rag. Go ahead and wipe any debris away from the unit. We did scar these 2 main O-rings, and so we're going to put new ones on just in case. The O-ring snaps into place. Again, a little bit of silicone. Should be good to go. At this point, we're going to reinstall this piece here. Now, it can get confusing if you've taken your pump apart and it's in pieces. Now you're going, how does it go back together? I'm lost. Well, I mean, that's why I guess we're doing the video, is because we're showing you. But if you can lay it out where this piece I took out, you lay them step by step, you'll actually know exactly how it goes back together, because you're going to be basically just reversing the process and putting everything back together. So in this case, we're going to be putting the tube back together through the black housing. The tube itself will be pushing There you go. Now that piece is together. At this part of the rebuild, I recommend that small O-ring, the buffering O-ring, I recommend going ahead and putting that back on, because you will forget it if you don't put it on at this point. And you hate to actually put everything back together and then realize, oh dang, I forgot that O-ring, and I've done it many times. So go ahead and put that O-ring back on. At this point, we're ready to put the shaft back in the vise. That way we can attach the other end. We will go ahead and set that in our vise. Remember, we have the rubber pieces. Sometimes you want to use leather, it depends on who you are. But again, we're trying to not scar the aluminum tube. Lock it into place. We're going to look at this piece. Again, this is the O-ring that's damaged, so I want to actually remove the O-ring and put a new one on. Again, very simple to do. The process that I use is I pinch the O-ring, I actually take a small tool, sharp end, and remove the O-ring. Voila, comes off very, very simple. Again, I'm looking at this piece here. I want to make sure that there's no grime, no dirt that's attached to the piece before I put the O-ring. So I'm going to clean, make sure everything's clean. Everything looks nice and clean at this point. I'll go ahead, again, get a little bit of silicone, rub it on my fingers, rub it on the O-ring, and then I'll slide this O-ring back in place. There you go. We're good to go. At this point, and again, normally you would want to replace the O-ring that's inside this unit here. And again, you're going to have a guide that's going to show you every O-ring that belongs in this pump. And so what you want to do is you'll want to go ahead and remove the O-rings and replace them. They're very easy to do. You just need to have the right tools. Right tools are something that's going to be sharp enough where you can actually go in, pull the O-ring out. Whenever you put the O-ring in, you want some kind of blunt object where you're actually forcing the O-ring into place. You might even use your Allen tools where you can actually put in place, pop up, and put them in a position where you know it's in the right location. Okay, O-ring in place. All O-rings look good. Again, I'm gonna put a little bit of silicone around where I'm actually going to attach. I'm going to push, and I'm going to then screw this piece on. This is going over and through an O-ring, so that's why I put the silicone grease on. At this point, we're going to screw this on. We're going to tighten this up. I can see this turning on me, so I'm going to go ahead and lock it in tighter. Okay, it's turning. That's the reason why the rubber inserts sometimes don't do a great job. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a blue paper towel, the shop towels that I have. I'm going to fold them. I'm going to now lay this down where I know that I'll get a better bond to the piece. I'll lock it into place, and there you go. Now I'm getting where I can actually tighten the piece up. Okay, that should be good. I'm going to inspect the aluminum tube, knowing that I didn't scar it any, which I did not. Now we're ready to install the other end of the pump itself. Okay, at this point we're ready to put the other end on. I'm going to inspect the support ring here and make sure that it's in good shape. It looks like it's in good shape. So at this point we'll go ahead and lock that into place. We'll screw this back on. The black tube, black housing. Make sure that that goes on. You shouldn't have to force anything. So if this is not screwing on, don't force it because you can cross thread. Now remember that small piston inside has threads on it. And so what we're doing at this point, we're not threading it into the housing here. All we're doing is we're going to tighten this housing up enough where, and you'll feel it when it tightens it, actually to come to a stop right there. It came to a stop. Okay, I know it's kind of tight on that housing, and then we actually will go ahead and don't be careful because This is not screwed into this housing, so if you actually sit there and hit that piece hard enough, you can destroy that brass tip. That's the tip that can break. And so what you want to do is you can close it, but I would recommend at this point taking a screwdriver, and remember this small piston screws in and out. There's the threaded hole right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring that threaded, the actual piece, we're going to bring it all the way up. And then we'll go through the adjustments on this piece. I'm actually going counterclockwise. And now you can see, if you look close enough, you can see where the small piston has, I've brought it all the way up. It's now at the point where I can't go any further. I might be able to go with a little bit of force. There we go. It's now I've stopped. It's bottomed out. And now I'm ready to go ahead and finish the process by using the measurements that are given whenever you're doing the final adjustments on this piston itself. So at this point, we've got a pump that is pretty much, I'd say 75% done. You can go ahead at this point and put the inlet valve back together. One thing that I wanted to make sure that you do whenever you're putting the seals back in and you're looking at the items, when this piece came off, you need to be able to look through it and see light. If you can't see any light, that means there's grime, there's grease, there's dirt, it's clogged up, the hole itself. That hole, it needs to be able to breathe. And so if you can't see light whenever you're holding the piece, this piece right here, it's the first piece that we actually take off the aluminum tube. If you can't see light through it, you know you need to actually clean that before you go ahead and finish the process. We're looking at the valve inlet, and I recommend replacing this O-ring. What I'll do is I'll take a 4mm wrench. I will put the piece on the end. It actually stabilizes the piece. Go ahead and at this point I'd recommend removing and replacing the O-ring that's on the valve piece itself. In your kit, you'll go ahead and receive the complete unit. So you might want to just drop the complete brand new unit in. If you're out and you're in a situation where you have O-rings, the inlet O-ring, and you just want to replace the inlet O-ring, it's very simple to do. You go ahead and, something with a sharp tool, you'll go ahead and take a sharp tool, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just go ahead and remove the O-ring. The easiest way that I found to do this is by getting and putting a little pressure on the O-ring, and then with the sharp tool, going ahead and cutting into the O-ring and then removing it. And at this point, you can go ahead, split the O-ring, you can pull the O-ring off, and then you're good to go. Go ahead and inspect the piece itself, making sure that it's a nice clean surface, smooth surface. Take a little bit of, take my paper towel, wipe it down. Okay, it looks brand new. I'll go ahead and pull a brand new O-ring. That's the O-ring that's going to snap over. It's very easy to install. What you're going to do is I put the O-ring on with my thumb first. I then go ahead and take this and I'll squeeze and I'll push and I'll pop it over the valve cap itself. It's very easy to do. It's just takes a little bit getting used to. Once that's on, and you know that it's in the right place, you can pull it off your wrench. You can then grab your pump housing, pump unit itself. You can drop the valve in place. You'll want to then take the spring that we pulled out earlier, inspect it, making sure that there's no dirt, grime, and install the spring into place. You will then take the cap that we removed, inspect. I notice there's a little grease and grime on there, so I'm going to sit there and I'm going to remove that with a Q-tip. Once I know that it's clean, I'm going to inspect it, I'm going to look through it, then I'm going to put it into place, and I'm going to screw the cap back on to position. I will then take and put this in my vise using very little pressure. I will lock in place and I will tighten. Doesn't take much. I'm not trying to force it, I'm just trying to tighten it enough where it's not going to unscrew by itself. At this point, we're good to go. I haven't removed my Allen screws here because I might need to use those in adjusting the links whenever I'm doing the adjustments on the rod. So at this point, I feel pretty good. I can hear a little bit of air pressure. I know it's coming out. Everything looks good. At this point, we're going to follow some instructions. Now, these instructions that I'm going to be using are going to be, you're going to need a caliper. Caliper or some device that you can measure the distance. And so what we're going to do is I take just a digital pair of calipers. That's what I like to use, probably the simplest. In the description below, whenever you're looking at the adjustments, we'll actually do a download and we'll link those. That way, whenever you're going through the process of rebuilding your pump, you can pull up the measurements. In this case, we're going to go ahead and finish the pump by doing the measurements as follows. We're going to pull the pump apart, exposing the aluminum tube. We will put the pump in a position where I know it's not going to roll off the counter. I will measure at 129 millimeters. 129.52. You don't want to go over 130. If you go over 130, you've gone too far, and we're talking in millimeters. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, and normally I put this on a bench because it's easier for me to do, but we're going to bring out, I'm going to put that in there, I'm going to come out here, and I'm going here. I'm at 128.10 right now. And what I want to do is I want to be at 129.52, somewhere in that area. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close it one more time. I'm going to go ahead and zero it just to be, I want to make sure that I'm doing this measurement right. So I'm taking this measurement, I'm taking and I'm adding 129.87 is what I have here. So something was, I was at 128 I believe before, now I'm at 129.87, which is actually where I want to be. I'm going to check it one more time just to make sure. I'm going to zero it, I'm going to go ahead and pull it. I'm going to take that end, take this end. There we go. Now it says if I pull hard, I'm at 130.04. I really don't want to be over 130. And so if you are over 130, what you can do is you can put your unit back in the vise. You can actually, and you should be able to anyways. Let me go ahead and tighten this up a little bit. Again, trying to keep this out of the vise as much as possible because I really don't want to scar the tube. So we'll go ahead and we'll turn that. Okay, I got a little bit more turn on that, so I know I'm good to go. I'll go ahead and pull that out. I have to do the inspection again on the aluminum tube just to make sure that I didn't scar it. Let's see, again, we're at 129.8, which is fine, as long as we're not over that 130 mark. So at this point, I feel comfortable with the measurements at this area, in this area here, between these 2 points. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to measure between these 2 points. And in this measurement, you want to be 125.28, 125.3. You really don't want to be over 125.3 in most. Try to keep it between the 125.2 area. Try not to go over 125.3. And I'll show you what I'm measuring up close. I'm going to go ahead and measure. I'm going to take that ridge right there. There's a ridge here. I'm going to measure there, and then I'm going to measure. There's a flat area here. I'm going to measure there. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to come apart here, and I'm going to measure these 2 items. Again, I'm going to lay this down where I can actually do this and feel confident that I'm getting the right measurements. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zero my calipers. I'm going to then take my calipers and I'm going to measure the distance here. And the distance that I have is 124.47. I want to be actually at 125.2 2.8, somewhere in that area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this portion and I'm going to unscrew it a little bit. What I'm doing is I'm giving it a little more length. I'm giving it, it's further apart at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and measure again. I'm at 125.26. I'm really close to where I need to be, so I feel comfortable that, you know, the measurement on this portion of the pump is, I'm good to go. I can go ahead and do that. I can close it, and I'm ready for the final adjustment. The final adjustment is actually adjusting the small piston inside. It's the bar. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a small screwdriver, and I'm actually going to take these screws out. I really don't need them any longer. It's going to be easier for me to hold on to the unit without these being here, to make sure that I'm feeling the right separation of the two parts. I'm going to go ahead and close this unit. Remember, we got a little O-ring in between there, so it's not going to close completely. But you can grab onto the unit here, and you're going to find with your flathead screwdriver, and you're going to start turning slowly. Okay, I feel it right there. I felt it. Right there. You can really feel it once you feel it. You might feel it move, but I tend to, you know, you don't know if it's, you know, you're afraid that maybe you're screwing the pump housing out too far, but you want to make sure that you feel separation. So you're screwing the piece and you're screwing it, and again you're going clockwise, and all of a sudden you feel, and I'm using my middle finger here and I'm holding on the seam, and I can feel the separation right there. I can feel it. You can feel it right there. Okay, once you have that separation and you know it's apart, what you're going to do is you're going to set and you're going to counterclockwise do a full revolution. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a full revolution. So I'm taking that and I'm going to turn it a full turn. And so I'm going to take that, I'm going to go around. Okay, and I'm going to go around. And there's another quarter. And then I'm back here and I'm at a full turn right. Went a little too far. Right there, I'm at a full turn. And so at this point, I'm ready to put the lock washer back into place. The lock washer, it's there. It makes sure that that small piston does not rotate in and out. You don't want that piston to rotate in and out. So I'm going to take my tool, and again, this tool is a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench. I'm going to I'm going to slowly go in, and we're going to turn this and lock it into place. Just a quick turn locks it into place. Okay, I'm good to go. I feel real confident. I'm feeling the air pressure. I can hear the air pressure, so I know that I'm in good shape. At this point, I'm going to take the outer tube. I'm going to take it, I'm going to look at it. I want to make sure that it's clean. There's no debris inside of it. Just in case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a shop towel. I'm going to put in. I'm going to just make sure there's no debris in this cylinder. So I'm going to take a wooden dowel. I don't recommend using any kind of metal. You can scar the inside of the pieces that you're working on. So with a wooden dowel, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push, and I'm going to just very lightly just go ahead and push and until it comes out. I'll look at it again. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any debris. In this case, I'll go ahead and I'll use my air source. I'll turn it on. Okay, I know it's clean. Okay, we're at the point where we need to go ahead and install the actual pump back into the tube, the housing. And so this is my recommendation is, of course, look at the arm, the way it's swinging. Look at the cutout in the tube. Whenever you get to a certain point, you're going to want this arm to swing out this direction. And so what we're going to do is we're going to line this pump up where we know that, remember whenever we started, we scarred one of the holes. It was basically you come up and you got a Allen screw hole right there. That's the one we scarred. And so if we can line that up, so if we can look close enough at this right here and find the one that we scarred, which I can see it, it's right there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take and we're going to, from any direction, we're going to look at where we're at. I'm going to turn that to where this lines up with the scar mark. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to install it. At this point, I'll set carefully, go in. Remember, we have O-rings that we're pushing into the tube, so we don't want to cut if we can help it. Move them back and forth. Just give it a little. Remember, don't lose that scar mark. Kind of turn it back to where you know you're lined up. You're going to push that in. Okay, we're at that point. I can see the scar mark. Remember, these threads are very sharp and they will cut you. Let's go ahead and install the set screws. Again, we're going to be using a 4mm wrench. Pretty standard. You can pick these up anywhere if you don't have one at your local hardware stores. At this point, we're just going to go ahead and snug them. We're not tightening. I'm just going to get everything lined up and make sure that all the set screws are in place, but we'll tighten them up at a later time. We know that everything's lined up right. The tube, of course, it's not coming out, but what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll grab onto it with the wrench. I'll go ahead and pull it out. And then at this point, I can go ahead and twist it and get it to come out of the body tube like it should. I know that the set screws are in place. I'll go ahead and at this point, I'm going to tighten these, that way I don't forget. I'm not using a torque wrench at this point. I'm using this is kind of like a torque wrench. It's a little give. I'm tight, but I'm not overly. And so what I'm doing is I'm just going to go and I'm going to go from end to end, cross from each other. That's tight. Make sure that you seat that Allen wrench all the way in. That way you don't slip and cause a scratch on your body tube. So there we go. You can go ahead and install the actual arm, the pump arm. We can actually go ahead and install that. We can look at this as well. We can make sure that everything looks good. There's always going to be a few marks on where you'll see that the pump motion is happening, and nothing you can do about that. You'll just notice that you don't want any major gouging, but in this case, everything looks good. You could put some metal-to-metal paste on it if you decided you wanted to. It might help it whenever you're actually using the pump motion. We'll go ahead and slide this piece into place. Be careful. It will slide in without too much effort. Line the holes up. Everything is lined up. Allen screw holes are lined up. We should be good to go. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll reinstall the Allen screws. 4mm on 2 of the Allen screws, and the other Allen screws are it's actually a 3mm. So I'm going to screw these in first. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up. Feels good. Okay, we're at the point where we're going to attach the arm itself to the pump, and so I'd recommend using a metal-to-metal paste just in the areas where maybe you're putting the pieces and they're coming together. It helps whenever the caulking motion, of course. Metal-to-metal paste is a paste that we sell here, and it's just like a graphite kind of paste. And put a little bit on your finger. I put a little bit on the areas where I know that the cam's going to be going through, and I will actually put the metal-to-metal paste also on the arm itself, just to help it out. And so where it's showing a little bit of marring right here and right here, go ahead and put a little bit of metal-to-metal paste. That way when it closes, I know that we've got some lubrication in that area. Here are the 2 little screws that we basically, the cams that we took out. They go together like so. What you want to do is you want to feel this surface right here. You feel it. If there's any major marring, pitting on this surface right here, you'll probably need to call and order these two items. That's what that arm basically, whenever it's all put together, that needs to be smooth. Otherwise, you might feel it whenever you're caulking and pumping your gun. I'm going to go ahead and bring the pump up. I'm going to line it up. I've already got metal-to-metal paste in there. I really don't need to put it too much more on. You can actually, the excess that you have here, you can put just a little bit on there. You don't need hardly anything on there. Just go ahead and run that. Find the hole, it will snap into place. Now we're at the point where we need to use, again, the 5mm wrench and the 4mm wrench. And in this case, I want to tighten it up, so I'm going to lock it in, or actually put it in a position where I know that pump won't move on me. I'll take my 4mm. I'm going to take my 5mm wrench, and we'll go ahead and find the right Allen. There we go. That's the 5. This is the 4. Okay, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and go down until I lock it into place. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to hold on to the long, and I'm going to put the short end in the Allen hole. And I'm going to set, and I'm going to work against together, and I'm going to actually just tighten it up. What I'm doing is I'm putting a little force on it. I want to make sure that they don't come loose. So we're good to go. What I'm doing here is I'm just checking. You should get air on both strokes. So whenever you're opening and closing, you should hear the air pressure coming out of your actual pump system itself. We're ready to actually put on the main housing that would be this end piece. This actually will attach, and then of course this end will actually attach to the block system of the rifle. So we're going to go ahead and open that up. We're going to screw this piece on. Make sure, of course, this has an O-ring here, an O-ring here. Again, I'm working with a fairly new gun, so normally I would go ahead and replace those O-rings, but in this case, they're actually in really good shape. And so look at them, make sure there's no marring, no cuts, and go ahead and attach this right here. What I do is I'll go ahead and I'll attach this with my fingers. And remember, in the beginning we used a wrench. At this point, I'm not going to use the wrench. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set, and I'm going to extend the arm out. I'm going to take, and I'm going to start. And you can be careful, because if you think that you got this attached and you don't, you can drop this block. And if you drop the block, you can hurt the gauge, you can hurt all, the trigger mechanism of the gun. And so just make sure that whenever you start this, that it's actually, you've got it started and it's screwing into position. And it is at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and screw this down. If you look here now, I've got this, it's stopped, but there's a screw hole here. If you see that right there, that's for the stock. That's the stock bolt. Remember, we took the 4-in stock screw out, and that has to line up. So I'm looking at the trigger itself. That actually needs to be lined up, and basically, if you can eye it, that should be right there. You go down the line, draw a line, and that hole needs to be right there. So with that in mind, you could take a wrench and turn it. I'm going to tighten it up like this. I will take the wrench. Remember, we didn't take the tape off, so we have the tape in position where I know I'm not going to scar. I'm going to go ahead and put that on and put that right there. I'm going to take that. I'm going to turn this right here. I'm going to look at that. I know that I need to go a little further. I'm going to go ahead and go a little further. I'm going to look at that. I've gone too far, and so I'm going to back it out just a little bit. It's got to be precise, because that Allen screw has to be lined up with that stock hole. Okay, I feel pretty confident that that's going to be in the right location. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and remove the tape that's on there. We're going to go ahead and slide the action into the stock at this time. Just make sure that whenever you're sliding this action into the stock, that all the components are lining up. You don't want to. There shouldn't be no reason why you have to push the stock or push the action into the stock. Trigger lined up. Everything's lined up there. Looking at the first set screws, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and we got 2 set screws, remember. One long, one short. The short one's going to go near the pistol grip. I'm going to go ahead and start that set screw. I'm using again, the 3mm Allen wrench. I'll now go through and I'll get this, hold it with my hand. If I line it up right, the tube, it should attach. Let's see here, make sure I get that in the, There we go. Feels good. It's going in. There we go. So it's going in. There we go. It's tight. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to now tighten the Allen screw. We're good to go. I mean, we've got everything together, and at this point we're ready to put the barrel back into the rifle. I would recommend before we put the barrel in the rifle that we make sure that the pump, of course, is working. So let's go ahead and start pumping, and we'll see if the actual gauge is coming up. What I do in a lot of cases, because I have a cylinder here, is I'll put a little bit of air pressure in, and then I'll pump from there. So let me go ahead and I'm going to dump a little air in the gun, and then I'll start pumping, and we'll go ahead and take it from a certain point and pump it up to 200 bar. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and test the pump to make sure that we're actually generating air pressure. And so what I'll do is we're at a little over 150 right now, probably 165, and I'm going to pump it to 200 bar. And so we'll go ahead and complete the strokes. 1, 2. There's 10 strokes, and we're over 200 bar at this time. So I know that the pump is working like it should. We're in good shape, and we just need to assemble the rest of the rifle. Okay, we've finished installing the pump. The O-rings, actually going through the pump and showing you how to replace the O-rings. Let's go ahead and install the barrel at this time. Again, this is basically just reversing the whole process. So as easy it was to take apart, it should be that as easy putting it back together. We'll go ahead and grab the barrel. We'll go ahead and take a rag if you like. And again, we're going to end up wiping this rifle down at the end. My fingerprints are all over it, but we'll go ahead, and if you got an oil rag, we'll go ahead and install the barrel. Now, you can see the marks right here that were caused by the Allen screws. What I'm going to do is I'm going to feed the barrel into the block, and then I'm going to line up the Allen screws. I can see the marks, and so what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of silicone on. Now these O-rings right here, you inspect these as well. These are O-rings that you'll need to make sure that they're not cut or damaged in any way. There's actually a O-ring, that's the barrel O-ring, that's inside. If you look closely, you can see the O-ring that's sitting inside. If you would like to, at this time, if you have extra O-rings, it'd be a good time to replace the O-ring while the barrel is out of the action. It's actually a little easier to do. We'll go through replacing the O-rings in another video, but just wanted to let you know. So we'll go ahead and install this barrel, and again, the Allen screws, I can see the marks. I'm going to go ahead and slide this into position. Again, it shouldn't take any effort at all. You should slide right in, and of course, you'll know that you're at the end at a stop. You can't force it any further. What you want to do is you'll want to take your magazine at this point. Here's your magazine, and that's the magazine that comes with the rifle. You'll want to cock your gun. If you can't push it in, you know that the barrel is actually too far in. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring it out. Not all the way, just pull it out enough to where you can actually install the magazine. When you get the magazine in position, you can then push the barrel back into place. Knowing that the barrel and magazine, they line up and they're perfect. It's a perfect combination where now you can actually slide the magazine in and out of the gun. Now all you have to do is make sure that you look down and the Allen screw marks are lined up where you can actually visually see those marks. If you can see the marks, that you know that the transfer porthole is lined up in the right position. I will then take an Allen screw. I'm taking the 4mm wrench. I'm going to take the largest of the set screws. I'm going to put it in. What I'm going to do is remember, this set screw is not tight, it's actually snug. And so I'm going to snug it. I'm going to take my magazine again. I'm going to put it in the rifle, make sure it slides in. It should slide in easy. You don't want it to fall out, of course, but I mean, it should slide in. You know it's going to it's in position. It's ready to rock and roll. The other two set screws, I'm going to go ahead and put those in as well. Seat the first set screw in. I'm not tightening it at this point. I'm just going to make sure that it's snug. Second screw is going in, snug. I'm going to go ahead and give it a pretty, wrench tight again. And I'm going to go ahead and do the front, wrench tight. I know that it's, at this point, the barrel is not going to move. It's not going anywhere. We're good to go. We're ready for our final step, and that's to, of course, put the shroud back together. Again, we went through a video on how to remove the shroud, and you might go ahead and log on, and actually it shows removal and it shows the process of putting the shroud back in place. Well, that's it. I mean, we took care of the FX INDY today. We went through repairing the actual pump system itself, and we went through and kind of showed you how to remove the barrel of this rifle. As you can see, the FX INDY, it's a very unique weapon. I love this gun, especially for you hunters out there. I mean, I think it's an awesome gun. I hope this video helps you in your endeavors with the repair work that you might want to perform at your location. Again, thank you very much for spending time with me, and hope to see you again soon.